Post and an MSNBC contributor, and Julia Ainsley, national security and justice reporter for NBC News. Welcome to all three of you. Julia, let's start with you because you've been involved in our reporting that and all week we've been speaking to FBI experts, probably something Lisa can confirm to us, who said the FBI could have interviewed 10 times as many people. They can put more agents on the case. They could have done it. Something has constrained them from doing so. What do we know about this, Julia?
That's right, Allie. It's not a lack of will on the part of the FBI, but this works really differently than a criminal investigation where the FBI can lead wherever the breadcrumbs take them. They were given at the beginning of the week a list of only 4 witnesses that they were allowed to interview. That later expanded, but we believe by only a very small window, and they still had to go back to the White House when they wanted to be a character witness, were not contacted. As we understand from the FBI perspective, that's because they've been constrained by the White House. The White House wants this to wrap up quickly, and frankly, they aren't looking for bombshells. And so purely based on the people who we believe the FBI has been allowed to interview, there may be others that we just simply don't know about that haven't come public, but purely based on the ones we do know about, we don't believe that there will be any real bombshells tomorrow. And I think it's telling that Mitch McConnell is already scheduling his vote and getting that underway. He'll want to look at that report tonight, but I don't think he's expecting anything in that report to change his schedule to get Kavanaugh confirmed this week.
Does feel a little, Lisa, like we're prejudging because I just don't understand if Mitch McConnell could schedule that vote as soon as he's seen the report. But Lisa, last Friday, there was a sort of a collective sigh of relief amongst those institutionalists like Jeff Flake or those people who thought, look, a potential cloud is being lifted over, lifted from the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Supreme Court around this nomination by moving forward with an investigation. Could we be in a situation where it's the worst of all worlds, where they had some sort of investigation and it wasn't thorough?
I think we are in that worst of all worlds because it certainly looks like a White House whitewash. You have a situation where they, in essence, have dictated, according to all reports, a few number of people who could be interviewed. The vast majority of people who have information that's pertinent have not been interviewed by leaps and bounds, and they're turning the report in early. They could take tomorrow even to interview more of those people who've come forward, including Brett Kavanaugh's college roommate from his freshman year who said he was never interviewed by the FBI, not back in the initial FBI investigation or this one. And so this looks like very much like the fix was in, which is exactly what the White House counsel's office wanted in trying to constrain this. The idea that the FBI would not go back and interview Brett Kavanaugh. He certainly wasn't interviewed about these matters in any significant way during the hearing, which was limited to 5-minute increment questions. The idea that they would not go back to Dr. Ford also is appalling. I'm not trying to blame the FBI itself. It's clearly been operating under this leash, but it's outrageous, outlandish, unacceptable, and I hope that it's unacceptable to Senators Flake and the others who have been on the fence.
Jennifer, it's a little ridiculous for Democrats to think that if Brett Kavanaugh were to withdraw or his name were to be withdrawn because of anything that's found in this report, that suddenly Donald Trump is either not Why does this become about it being Brett Kavanaugh?
Well, I think the president is just dug in, as he usually is. He's made this into another one of these divisive issues, a gender war that he's using to rev up his base for the midterms. And I think at this point they've wasted so much time. Had they pulled him weeks ago, they might have gotten someone through. There's probably a genuine concern now that they won't. But I think we should keep in crumble. That may be a very good bet. These people may find the pressure too much to bear and may give way. But none of this is going to stay confined to the FBI. When and if the Democrats win one or both houses, they're going to call up Christopher Wray. They're going to ask about constraints put on the investigation. They are going to call up all of these witnesses who weren't talked to by the FBI and ask them. And after they've collected all of this information, don't you think they're going to pursue an impeachment proceeding about against a sitting Supreme Court judge? That's why this embarrassed. Judge Kavanaugh will be embarrassed. This will not end. The only way it ends, frankly, is if those three senators get up the nerve to vote no.
Or Julia, an investigation that passes the smell test of being thorough is conducted, and everybody gets to be satisfied that the best investigation was done and comes to their own conclusion, because we're still in this world where people are dug in on either side, and by not interviewing these 40 people or 400 people or 6 more people, I don't know, I'm not an investigator, but by not investigating them, as Jennifer says, it leaves the whole process open to investigation. It leaves the Judiciary Committee open to question, and it leaves the Supreme Court open to question and challenge.
Exactly. There are a lot of people who will be kind of left out in the open here without a lot of cover. But I want to go over what these senators are going to look at tonight or potentially tomorrow. It's probably past the bedtime of a lot of senators already. But when they see this tomorrow and on the schedule that we understand, they're going to be looking at reports. These are summaries of interviews that they've done with these witnesses. The FBI does not come up with its own conclusion. So nowhere in there will they say, we did not find any evidence that supported Dr. Judge's or Ms. Ramirez's allegations, or let Kavanaugh off the hook. In this case, they're just going to be looking at summaries of the interviews that they did. They won't be able to talk about the interviews that they could not do. So really, it's up to these senators to be watching this conversation, to be reading the newspapers, to understand who was left out of this conversation, because what's not in the report might not be in front of them tomorrow morning. And as far as the FBI being worried about this, I've spoken to a number of people who say that field offices across the country, the rank and file that make up the FBI, are really worried that they are going to be put through another PR disaster.
Right, they're getting thrown under the bus here, because we know from people, your reporting it speaks of people who went to the FBI, who wrote a letter to them, who said, I'd like to tell you, I mean, I think for regular Americans, it's kind of puzzling that you can't get the FBI to listen to you when you have information. I mean, if I'm the FBI agent, you give me a report and it's no good, I throw it away. I say it's no good, it was not of any use. But to actually not listen to some of these people, Lisa, maybe the problem is that we're all lying to ourselves about the robustness of this process, right? Maybe bringing Rachel Mitchell in, the prosecutor from Arizona, and making it feel like a court case was fooling everybody into thinking that the Senate Judiciary Committee is in a position to actually get to the bottom of this.
Well, I think that you point that out very well, because this is upside down, it's backwards. What happened in the Anita Hill circumstance was the FBI did its investigation, and then there was a hearing that included 20 witnesses. Right now what's happened is there was a very truncated hearing that didn't include the witnesses. Now there's been a follow-up investigation that didn't include many of the witnesses, and there's no further opportunity to ask questions, no further hearing. All these people are being excluded from the process, and their information bears on key facts about Brett Kavanaugh's behavior, whether he was belligerent when drunk, whether he had the capacity to attack a woman when drunk. And he's lied about that, I think. He's lied about that and many other things in his testimony. And the question of why they would want to put someone on the Supreme Court who has such disrespect for the rule of law in terms of his own candidness in testifying before the Senate is beyond me. The court is supposed to be held in the highest esteem, the highest respect. It's our supposed to be our most neutral and and trusted institution, and they're about to trash it by trying to put this guy on the court as quickly as possible with this sham investigation.
Jennifer Rubin, the danger now, we're seeing, by the way, that for a lot of Republicans, it's working what the president's doing. It's becoming a rallying cry. We'll talk about it a little later, but it's becoming a cultural rallying cry on some levels for Donald Trump saying that he's scared for young men. Who you believe should be on the court and what politics you believe they should have or what ideology you believe should have is a conversation we've been having for more than 250 years in this country, and it's a relevant and valid conversation. But it's becoming something else. This has become a strange wedge issue. You believe Kavanaugh if you want a conservative on the court, and you believe Christine Blasey Ford if you don't.
This is the tribalization of all of our politics, as we've seen, that the goal determines your thinking process all the way through, and it corrupts our thinking, it corrupts our debate, so that everyone is simply trying to get to the place that they wanted to all along. And I think you have to go back to some basics. You have to go back to Kavanaugh's own words about the judge's responsibility to be a neutral arbiter.
Called it an umpire.
You have to go back to the canons that the lower court judges all abide by, which is to eschew politics, to not be a partisan, to not have any hint of bias. And, it was interesting. I was speaking to Senator Blumenthal, who was on the committee earlier tonight, and he said two things of great interest. One is that he really has trouble understanding how his colleague, his good friend, Jeff Flake, could accept this as anything approaching a reasonable investigation. The other thing he said, which I think is so important, he, along with Jerry Nadler, as you know, are both leading the investigation and the lawsuit, one of the 3 lawsuits concerning the president's emoluments. Senator Blumenthal told me if that ever reaches the Supreme Court, he would demand the recusal of Justice, then would be Justice Kavanaugh. He's already declared his allegiance to one party. Right. And what about all those lawsuits that are brought by Democratic attorneys general from the state? How could they appreciate, how could they plan on getting a fair shake? What about the ACLU? What about all of the liberal interest groups that come before the court? They have already heard this judge pronounce himself as someone who feels really victimized by a grand left-wing conspiracy. So I think he does himself and the court huge damage, and right now there are about 3 people who can stop this.
Yeah, well, 1 week ago tonight, our eyes were on those 3 people, Jeff Flake, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins, and 1 week later, our eyes are on the same 3 people. Thank you to all 3 of you, Lisa Graves, Julia Ainsley, and Jennifer Rubin. Coming up, the fallout of the New York Times expose on the Trump family tax scheme.